Hello, this is Dr. Flight. Again, I hope you're doing great. Got a cool video here that, again, extends this idea of maintaining competitive advantages and strategies that companies will find themselves throughout periods of time, maybe defined by the product life cycle, but also just the competitive pressures and stresses that may exist. So there's really two parts here. We're going to look at offensive and defensive strategies, and then strategies specifically for market share leaders and market share followers. Okay, so again, looking at that product life cycle chart, you'll remember that this chart shows the curve of sales for an industry or product category in particular over time. And there are typically four distinct stages: the introduction and the growth stages, and then maturity and decline. What's depicted here indicates really the first three stages, but a decline continues, of course, as the chart extends. But what is highlighted here is that as the products mature, typically we look at this from a growth perspective. As growth expands and then slows, the strategies that companies will typically take will vary. So early on, when there's lots of opportunities to gain market share and get new customers, we want to be very aggressive. And so we look at offensive type strategies. Conversely, once the market tends to slow a little bit, we look at taking a more protective position where we want to maintain and secure the market share that we have and fend off any erosion of that market share. And we think of those more as defensive types of positionings or strategies. When we specifically look at kind of this mix, again, we look at this sort of dynamic a lot when we look at product portfolios, when we look at our positioning just relative to competition. We like to overlay that with the market and kind of combine these two spaces together. So we see that a lot, and this is another illustration of that, where again we have this idea of market position in one axis and then market attractiveness in the other. Again, market position deals with like how well you compete with other firms in the marketplace, how you stack up to them, and then market attractiveness again looks at like how attractive the market looks. Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Is it highly profitable? Is it very large? Those types of dynamics come into play. So again, if we were going to look at the product, the product line, kind of as we look at this, I've superimposed the product line curve sort of sections: decline, maturity, growth, and introduction along that y-axis. But we can also look and see where we may employ offensive and defensive strategies. And again, they sort of overlay this idea that when the market's expanding, we want to be aggressive, but when the market is slowing, we want to be more defensive. And typically we're not going to be in that lower left area to begin with. Those areas, again, if you remember the growth strategies or portfolio strategies, that would be like the dog, divest, harvest types of things that we would do in that area. So anywhere to the upper right then is going to be where we want to progress and we want to move towards. And note that the more competitive your positioning is, the more options you have. You see more, you can be offensive, you can be aggressive, but you can also be defensive at the same time. Until you hit that far lower right area, again, you're probably going to start divesting at some point anyways, when the market is in decline. But really in the maturity stages, you want to be the late maturity stages when you've got an established market share. Oftentimes there's stability that happens, and we want to become more defensive and more protective of what we have. So again, kind of just think about the context of when these things are happening, and that helps. And when we start looking specifically at these like offensive strategies versus defensive strategies, they're just that. They're points of aggression or points of defense, and that's kind of, I mean, there are different things we can do, but it kind of comes down to that. Some of the schematics show that we can grow and we can expand in different ways. One of which may be growing sales in existing markets like that we're currently in. Sometimes we call this a penetration growth strategy, and that's from the Ansoff model again. So we can grow share, we can position ourselves directly towards competitors who share our customers and try to steal share away from them. That's a very frontal attack. That's a frontal attack type of a thing. That's where we jump very aggressively into that. We can look to grow revenue from existing customers by selling them more products, or finding what we call customer surplus, which is money the customer has, but they're not yet spending in our product category, but they have it available to do so. And so we want to entice them and encourage them and create more complementary products and do things like that that will bring them into that money into our sales model. Additionally, finding new market segments that maybe they're the same type of market segment that we're currently serving, but in a different geographic location or another area. So in other words, if there's a market segment we serve here, if we can duplicate that market segment in another location, and in other words, not really do much to modify what we're doing, but bring it to a new group of consumers that again behave and act similarly to the ones that we have, that might be an expansion strategy that we can do. Even though that's not, it's hard to point that to be like sales in an existing market, but we're not changing fundamentally what we do per se. And then finally, another thing is to identify more ways to get your existing customers to simply buy more volume, buy more of what you sell, or buy more of what you have to offer to them. Getting them to buy bulk volumes and some things like that might be something that we do. But in essence, what we're talking about is growing demand within the market by taking share away from other competitors, or finding new ways for your existing customers to buy your products. Again, that's clearly a growth strategy that's being proactive, very proactive in identifying new ways to create revenue streams from existing customers. Another thing that we can do is improve our competitive positioning. There's no reason why we couldn't do this by creating more loyalty. Customer relationship management tools help us do this. They help us reduce our customer churn, which is the percentage of customers who leave us each time period, and obviously that increases customer retention. Customer retention is a big driver of customer lifetime value and the profitability each customer brings. So the more we can keep customers in our fold, the more loyal they are, the less they're likely to go somewhere else. Another thing that we can do in this particular category and to improve customer and competitive positioning in particular would be to create product differentiation, unique sales propositions, changes to our existing products that are going to, again, create distinctiveness between our product and our competitors. It's something that we'll do. Now, over on this other side, I have a couple other things that they're not grow sales in existing markets, excuse that typo there, but lowering costs and building market advantages. When we lower cost, we're lowering our costs to operate, our operational costs. By doing so, we increase our profit margin. And that's always a thing that we can do internally, that we want to do internally, and it helps our competitive positioning. I mean, it helps us compete against other firms. That's why it's in this area. And then also simply doing marketing better. Doing the marketing tasks that we do, branding better, positioning better, relating to our customers better, relating to our other fellow partners in our value chain and our channels to the customer. So distributors, retailers, suppliers upstream, all of those relationships that we have outside the firm with other companies can be bolstered, and then again that improves our competitive position. Okay, so lots of things we can do from an offensive perspective. Again, ignore the gross sales in existing markets. Enter new markets though. Grow products in new markets. Find new ways to sell products to customers that are new or ones that you've never reached before. Sometimes we look for market segments that are close to but not the same as the types of customers we're selling now. We call those adjacent markets. And we find those, like entering those new market segments, easier than completely new ones, though entering completely new ones is an option. Two examples of that would be entering emerging markets, which are markets that are not yet developed. They're typically markets that are in the early stages of the product life cycle but haven't really developed in terms of who's going to serve them from a firm perspective, or they're so young that very few customers have purchased yet. Maybe 2 to 5% of customers have purchased in the introduction stage of a product category, and that would be an example of an emerging market metric that we would look at. Developing new markets is an entirely different thing. It's an extremely risky thing, and it's very rare that you create a new product that's never been seen before, and in essence, by doing so, you create a new group of consumers. And so you're making the market. You're a market maker in that particular case. Again, it's very rare, pretty risky, but if you're able to pull it off, then you've got great leadership components and elements that will help you do many other types of things. So that can be a good thing there. Examples of just entering new markets. Let's take Coca-Cola as an example, who has had lots and lots of different product innovations over the years. But remember, Coca-Cola started as a carbonated soft drink with one product. They expanded and did product differentiations to carbonated beverages, and then they started to expand into other versions of drink that are not carbonated and not related to their model. Now, I think many of their drinks that they have still use a formula, they still use a concentration, they still use a mix pattern where the product can be mixed at distributors and bottled, where the main syrup is made somewhere else. But imagine if they jumped into, and they did, of course, the energy drink section. We get like Monster Energy and companies like that, and it's not a stretch to have the Coca-Cola Corporation own one of these brands and enter that new market. And again, push us back in time when that market didn't exist. Like, there was a time when energy drinks did not exist and there really wasn't a consumer market for it, but somebody came in, they created that market, and it was an emerging market. Now it's an established market, of course, and that would be an expansion for this brand. Now, Coca-Cola is clearly a share leader. This is an example of a company that has a lot of market share in their respective categories, in the many drink categories that they're in anyways. Yet they can still be offensive. They don't have to be completely defensive. Now, specifically in the cola area for Coca-Cola, they probably want to be defensive in that particular space, because they're a huge market share in a very mature market for colas specifically. And we only have a couple, like we have Pepsi and RC and maybe some local colas, right? But beyond that, they already hold a lot of market share, so they want to defend their market share. Their goal is not necessarily to expand in the cola space, but to maintain in the cola space what they are offering and what they can offer. So in other categories, though, they can grow their portfolio and be offensive and be aggressive in that area, in that respect, right? Okay, so that brings us up to these defensive strategies then, and kind of what we're going to think about from a defensive perspective. Um, here the idea is largely a defensive strategy, and this is just an important summary, is to protect profitability and market share when your business reaches a growth or profitability sort of stall or standstill. So when you're reaching your limit, when you're reaching the point in which you're plateauing in terms of your profitability levels and how much market share you have, now's the time to start defending. You've been aggressive. You've grown your brand, you've grown your sales, you've grown your profit margin, your shares. You've grown all of that. Now, probably that product's reaching that late growth stage, maturity stage. So now we want to defend. And this isn't just it. We want to protect our position. We want to defend from substitutes, the best we can, in terms of maybe modifying our products a little bit, but rely heavily on your CRM programming. That's what we want to do. And then eventually what we will do is monetize or harvest or divest. And what that means is we want to begin to reduce the amount we're putting into the product from a cost perspective. So we want to start lowering our costs as the markets shift and change away from that product. So you still want to sell product, you still want to have volume, but every successive time period your volume is going to diminish because the market's getting smaller and smaller for your particular product, or something to that effect. Again, that's the late stages when we're truly in decline. This is not this is like when the market is looking less and less attractive to the point in which you don't want to invest further into it. So managing those cash flows and divesting is important, but there's no reason why you can't do multiple strategies at once. We'll look at an example here for General Motors, where their competitive positions in some of their product lines before 2010 had diminished. They had eroded, and these areas weren't as profitable for them. They really weren't able to compete with some of the other companies. Customer choices were changing. Remember, there was a big recession in that period of time, and certain brands and companies didn't do so well. So for their perspective, the idea is to divest or harvest some of their brands that they're less competitive in, especially in product categories or spaces in the automobile area that that product category was diminishing, and reinvest in their core products that they still have strong share in, and simultaneously in new technologies that they feel are opportunities. So you can do this divesting, this reshuffling of your portfolio where you pull some products out. That's a very defensive type of a thing, while also taking an offensive stance or a protective stance in some of your other categories. So pre-2010, they had the Hummer, Pontiac, Saab, Saturn brands. They divested those brands and added the technologies of hybrids with Volt, and reshaped their company's portfolio after 2010. And so the chart kind of shows revenues and margins and return on marketing investments. So marketing sales expenses are something we track, and then we look at how effective that spend is in marketing and sales. And you'll notice that, there were some declines up to 2010, and then once that change was made, they're able to shift their cost structure around and put money into more profitable areas by getting rid of the ones that were less desirable for them. Right, so getting rid of some of those products allow them to channel resources into other areas that make more sense, seeing a positive net effect moving from 2010 on. A couple other charts, just kind of, again, visually seeing what we're looking at here. On that product life cycle chart, again, we have that hybrid space, that hybrid component in 2010, where they're putting money into new technologies that they feel will grow and develop into other business lines. While they want to protect some of their features, they want to divest a few that they feel are less profitable or have less future. This also allows them to, when we talk about resources, allows them to focus more on the holdings that they have rather than having their thoughts spread over too many brands and too many areas. Again, a couple just visualizations of operating income as a percent of sales, and then total operating income on the far left from 2006 up to the change year 2010. And you'll notice that they had significant declines from 2006 to 2007, again down to 2008, again down in 2009. They reshuffle their portfolio to see these figures push back up to the positive range after 2010. So operating income as a percentage of sales, again, the efficiency in which they're able to use their cost to make revenue, and overall operating income, again, increasing. Even though you're getting rid of products, your other products are outperforming because you're able to invest more into them by doing this. So again, this is like a defensive strategy, but while at the same time preparing for the future and being offensive in the areas that you feel make the most sense, where you can make gains in your profit margins or market shares and stuff like that. Okay, so defensive and offensive positioning through the product life cycle, and just kind of thinking about what that means. Now, applying this is a little bit different, and looking at specific strategies for both followers and leaders. Some of these are duplicates. These are things that you're going to see over and over again if you look at this type of literature. So I'll briefly describe these strategies, but kind of at the end of the day, when you look at the structure of an industry, you want to decide whether you want to be offensive and attack or defensive and not. So let's push this offensive side of things, and it varies if you are the smaller firm looking to attack the bigger firm, or the bigger firm looking to gain market share. And just again, think of the structure of the market in terms of how share is distributed across the different firms. In market one, you've got a share leader with 60% of the share, and the followers and the nichers, they call them, those would suggest that there's not a lot of strong competition. So you want to probably protect your 60% share and not be too concerned about being very offensive. You may pick at and maybe collect up and maybe be able to identify some opportunities that are right, but not exclusive. Like, you don't want to be completely offensive. You want to kind of have a primarily defensive stance, but then when appropriate, look to pick off maybe some of the followers, or kind of protect yourself, at least to the extent where you maintain your 60% share and don't become complacent. This is the complacency column, and that's where that share leader may become too happy with 60%, and then over time have their share erode. If we move over to the far right, we have a very different situation where the share leader holds a precarious 20% of the market. However, the market's extremely fragmented. So this is one where there's a lot more competitors, and all the competitors are really, really small. So 65% of the market's made up of little tiny companies with small market shares. This is a very dangerous type of a category because while you're the share leader, you're not probably worried about any individual company, but you're worried about all of them. So this is that, I don't know if you've heard the term death by 1,000 cuts. One cut isn't, one nicher isn't going to hurt you, but several, 20, 10, 15 of them collectively will. And it's not that they're colluding or anything like that. It's just that you have to have your eyes on all of them. And that strains your resources tremendously. So if you could do some things, like imagine if you could invest in or purchase up or buy up some of your followers and some of the nichers, so that you could roll their share into your share. That might be a strategy that you want to do. So mergers and acquisitions might be ripe for this type of environment, where you can, kind of protect yourself by taking those opponents off the board, basically. That might be something that you consider doing. Again, growing your market share, growing through product line development, the diversification of those lines, finding new market segments that are adjacent to yours. Being aggressive is probably what you're going to end up doing as opposed to market one. In the middle, you're really challenged because, again, you're kind of in those gray areas where you could protect what you have, but also go be aggressive as well. You can play both offense and defense simultaneously. You're probably going to have to be a little bit more mixed in terms of what you're looking to do. With that said, though, if you're a leader, what are some of the things that you're going to do? Now, there's a bunch of different strategies. One of which, though, is going to be this protect and defend fortress position. Another, which is a little less common probably, but we saw it with General Motors, is to contract or make some strategic withdrawals. The other strategies deal with growing in new markets or taking a direct approach to focus on these competitors that you feel pressure from, but again, you have the positioning, you have the strength and power of market share, so you're going to be a leader in that sense. So you're going to be the big dog, kind of fending off these folks who are again trying to take share from you. So again, that fortress defense, that you're dealing with, the fortress position, your focus is going to be retaining and maintaining your market share, confirming your current customers, building loyalty, again, leveraging your CRM programming to help continue to establish strong bonds with your customers. The flanker position is an interesting one because it's also available to the followers as well. But you have a core group of customers, and what you're going to want to do is look for adjacent customers or customers that are close to or flank the customers that you currently offer your product to. Again, this is an opportunity where you see a weakness in the competitors who are currently serving an adjacent market segment. What you can do is you can redefine the market by broadening it and offering new products. That would actually, what we do is we call it a filling in strategy, when you add products that create variations and you're kind of finding customers around those that you're currently serving but that are underserved. So underserved customers, if you were to do a perceptual map and you knew your customer base was right at one point in the perceptual map, there are going to be customers around that don't quite meet your criteria but could buy your product. So adapt your product a little bit to match their needs a little bit better. So fill out your product line, and you'll grow that space. So flankers are customers that are close to yours that are underserved. And that's something that your competitors may, or that your followers may also do, and that's a strategy they could pursue. The confrontation strategy is direct competition. You're directly competing against a follower. Your goal is to highlight why your product's superior, why your brand is better, and the deficiencies of your competition. Market expansion is when you go to a completely different market, find whole new customers to sell to that you don't have competitors in currently, or your current followers don't compete in. It's like an avoidance problem. It's a way to avoid competition, if you will, by finding a new market. You're finding new problems, perhaps, but they're not going to be problems with your existing followers that are trying to take your market share from you. And then finally, I mentioned this idea of a contraction model or a contraction element. So just kind of pulling us back, looking at this chart one more time, just for reference. The fortress strategy is a defensive strategy. The confrontation strategy, it deals with a very proactive, direct approach to hurt your followers, hurt those who are trying to take share from you. The flanker strategy deals, again, this is a dual threat because the followers may do this as well, but find customers that are close to yours. You don't directly sell to, but you could directly sell to if you modified some of your product offerings. And then finally, this market expansion approach, where you find an entirely new group of customers that are not currently being served by the threats you perceive from other firms that are the followers in your space. Okay, so those are strategies for our leaders. Strategies for followers are similar in a lot of ways, right? There's some of these things that you're going to see. There's three, though, that are new. We already kind of know about this flanking approach. Again, they're going to do the exact same thing where they're going to identify spaces in that perceptual chart where customers are slightly underserved, and they can pick away those customers by offering something niche for them. That frontal attack, again, that's similar, where they will look at the leader and they will take their product directly to them as a confrontation, as a direct threat type of a thing. They're going to compare themselves directly to the leader and say we're better, and for these reasons. The other three, though, are a little bit different. So, we mentioned this frontal attack, this direct attack. One of the three that is a little bit different is called a leapfrog. A leapfrog is when you take your product concept and you put new technology in, or create it in such a way that's radically new or different, where you completely steal the product category, or completely take over a product category because of what you've done. So when Apple innovated and they created the music file sharing stuff for their iPod, and created their iOS platform for Apple Music, that leapfrogged a lot of their competition, because a lot of their competition just couldn't compete with that technology. It was a new technology. It was something new that customers had never seen before. A lot of customers just completely abandoned other analog and other digital types of devices and went to the iOS platform, because the platform structure and the software behind the iPod completely revolutionized and changed how music was housed, how it was shared, how you accessed it, how you bought it. This idea, back then you had to purchase music, And after Apple did their file sharing stuff, it became more like the music was owned by the company and you just borrowed it. You just rented it while you were listening to it, basically. Is basically what happened. Instead of actually owning the rights to it, you didn't. And so that whole model leapfrogged the rest of the industry, to create a new way customers could buy products and such, in that product category. It was very innovative, risky obviously, but it worked for them. Mentioned the flanker attack already, so we won't really talk about that anymore. So frontal attack, flank attack, we've kind of talked about already. Leapfrog is kind of a new thing, and then we get into the encirclement idea, and then finally the guerrilla attack. The encirclement idea is when you identify new market segments, that again, this is beyond the flanker. So flankers are customers that are very closely related to those that you already serve that are being underserved. The encirclement is when you find a new market segment in a very open space in that perceptual chart that is largely untapped. They might be close, but they're distinctly different market segments. So that's going to be a key to that. Again, this is a very niche thing. You're finding a new market segment that is not being served. The market segment is not going to be large, but you could go into it and be the shareholder in this very small space. Again, it's not going to be large enough for the leaders to worry about, but it'll be large enough for you. And it'll be something that as a follower you can adopt and you can go into, and you can build your name in a new market segment that exists. The final one, this guerrilla attack, is really kind of a funny one, because it's when you do things that are very, very unconventional in your marketing approach. So you do radically different advertising appeals. You find new and weird and odd ways to distribute your product, or to package your product, or something along those effects, to the extent that it disrupts the industry and causes chaos in the industry and causes some type of kerfuffle, some type of anxiety, and it forces leaders to readdress how they approach things, and do things. So I can't think of any really good examples offhand, but sometimes we use this term in advertising. Guerrilla advertising is a term that's used, and what it is when you use non-traditional methods to reach an audience. Doing pranks and skits and stunts and doing attention-grabbing activities that are going to draw attention to your brand is a way you can do this. It's called guerrilla advertising. And same thing with the rest of your marketing portfolio or set of skills. If you do things radically different that grab attention and are not the norm of the industry, then it'll create chaos. It'll create anxiety again among the leaders, and that's basically the idea of it's oftentimes a very last approach. It's very oftentimes an approach out of desperation, if you will. To think about that. So again, this whole idea of kind of the leapfrog strategy takes you beyond what's currently being done because of some new technology. Typically, flanking attack looks for customers that are already within that market segment that are being underserved, that are ripe for taking. The encirclement strategy deals with finding a new market segment that's closely related to the market segment that your leader is currently serving, but distinctly different from it. It may be similar to the leader's version of finding a new market segment. Might be something similar to that, but it's clearly finding new pockets of consumers, and I would characterize it as a niche type of an approach. And then again, that frontal attack, which you're already familiar with, where you take direct competition, you take your approach directly to your competitors with comparisons between yourself and them to try to win over market share from those leaders to you. Okay, so this has been kind of a lot. I get that. There's a lot of stuff going on here. This video has talked about offensive and defensive philosophies, if you will, and kind of when and where you might want to kind of push the gas pedal or push the brake pedal in your approach to reaching markets. But then also there's a handful of different strategies that you can take to attack your opponent, whether they're followers or leaders, and how you can address that growth element and the strategies that are involved with that. There's a lot of other literature that is kind of in this area on strategy deployment. So I encourage you to, if you're interested, to look those types of things up. But otherwise, if you have questions, obviously, please let me know. I'm happy to reach out or have some conversations about any of these topics. Hope you're doing great, and yeah, have a great day.